Welcome to Nature's Guardians. I'm Micah Siegel. Today I have a very special guest. I'm talking with Bryan Caplan from George Mason University. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Fantastic to be here, Micah. Let's
Great
do
to
it.
have you. I'm so rude. Oh my gosh. For people who don't know, Bryan Caplan is an American economist and author. He has written The Myth of the Rational Voter, The Case Against Education, Open Borders, Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids, and his latest book, You Will Not Stampede Me, Essays on Nonconformism. Bryan has a PhD in economics from Princeton University. He teaches economics at George Mason University as a professor of economics and is a researcher fellow at Mercatus Center. Anything I missed that you want to add?
That's good.
Okay, so let's get moving. Today we're talking about animals. So the first question is, did you ever have a pet?
Yes, I did. I had a cat named VIC, which stood for Very Important Cat. I had a dog named Duchess, who was my best friend for a few bad years in my childhood. And then I also had a number of hamsters.
Sounds very nice. You've written a lot about government. How would you summarize your thinking about government's role in society?
And here is my favorite slogan. Um, Markets do the good things that sound bad. Government does the bad stuff that sounds good. Government drapes itself in an enormous amount of self-righteousness. Sounds really good if you don't know much, but I say that if you really study not just what government claims to be doing, but what it actually does, and especially after you know some economics, and then finally detach yourself from your society. This is very important. Be a nonconformist. There's a lot of economists who know all this stuff, but they just really can't bring themselves to say, yeah, the system's terrible. Anyway, I have detached myself from my society and I said, yes, the system's terrible. In one of the books that I'm working on right now called Unbeatable, The Brutally Honest Case for Free Markets, I just make a list of the main things that government does and say the main things that government does are bad, but they exist because they sound fantastic.
So, our friend Tyler Cowan says, quote, I think governments should do more to limit cruelty to animals. What do you think? What do you think government's role should be to help
Hmm.
animals?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I would say that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Sounds really good, but I think it's actually bad. I mean, it does, stepping back, this does require a philosophical judgment about whether or not human welfare is more important than that of animals. It sounds good to say that it's not. I even remember as a kid saying I'd rather that tons of human beings died and that the laboratory rats be let out. But um, my considered view is that's totally wrong, and that human well-being is much more important than animal well-being. So my view is actually government should not try to prevent cruelty to animals, and animals are property. And while we have a lot of sympathetic feelings, especially for our pets, I don't think government should do that.
So, let's get into pets deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are at least 60 million cats and 80 million dogs in the US. More
Mm-hmm.
than 2 million dogs and cats are killed each year because their owners don't want them anymore. Do you think something should be done?
Right. I mean, I would wonder about whether those numbers are even correct. So is that like a tally of the total number of animals killed in animal shelters, or what is it?
Yeah. Yeah. 2
Right.
million dogs and
So,
cats
I
killed
mean, I
each year.
figure that most animals in animal shelters are not ones their owners don't want anymore, but ones that never had an owner. Maybe you know more, but that would be my guess. I mean, obviously, there have been long-standing pleas to get people to spay and neuter their pets. And if that were followed very rigorously, then there would be very few animals in animal shelters. Um, but again, my view is that the well-being of animals is just not very important, and that government should not do anything about this. Now, by the way, just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. So, I mean, I have some very good friends who are vegans and think that what the way human beings treat animals is like an ongoing Holocaust, literally. Uh, a point that I made is this. All right. What about bugs? It's easy to have lots of sympathy for dogs and cats and other animals that we're used to having. But what about insects? Right now, I did actually track down some research on how many insects the typical human kills. There was, for example, a paper, I think from the Netherlands, where they just measured numbers of insects on license plates of cars. and then extrapolated from that to the whole surface of the cars and then multiplied that out. And they came out with a massive number of insects that human beings are killing just by driving around, I think tens of thousands per month, something like that. And then the question is, well, if the lives of all beings are equal, then isn't this way worse than what's happening to cats and dogs? Never mind whatever could be happening to human beings. Um, for this, now again, like part of the reason why I raise this argument is that I know that my friends who are very militant vegans still drive. So then the question is, well, why do you not worry about the well-being of insects and the fact that you seem to be killing way more insects just by driving around than you would ever go and kill in the process of eating a non-vegan diet? I mean, the answers that I've gotten, so there's one that's just obviously dumb, and that is, well, you can choose what you eat, but you can't choose whether or not you drive in our society. It's like, well, could you choose to drive 20% less? Yeah. So you could save thousands of insect lives by driving a bit less. All right. So that argument's pretty silly. Then there's the story that some have said, like, well, animal or insects just don't feel pain. Insects don't suffer. They look like they suffer, but they don't. Trust me. They don't have the right kind of brains. This is one of like, So until brain science developed at its current level, then you would have been unwilling to kill them. But now that you realize it's that they don't have the right kind of brains for pain, you do. And um, this brings us to a famous philosophical question, which is the problem of other minds. I mean, how do I even know that you have thoughts and feelings, Micah? I don't have mind reading, I don't have telepathy. So I really can only infer that you are enough like me. But by that standard, insects seem quite similar to other animals. So I think it's very unlikely that they don't suffer and feel pain just like other animals. Then finally, so you're like, well, what do we say? You could say we're just going to have all of our lives revolve around ending insect suffering because there's so many more of them than the animals that actually are popular, right? Or you could say, guess maybe this whole all animals are equally important and their welfare is of equal moral significance is just wrong. And it's like, well, why? Um, the answer that I favor is one that makes a lot of sense. It's one that actually fits the way that people, in fact, think about these issues, but it's ugly to say. But I'm all about saying ugly, true things. And that is that the intelligence of the creature matters a lot for how important it is, whether it is suffering or not. Insects being super dumb, it doesn't really matter if billions of them die, at least very barely. More intelligent animals matters more, but then finally, it's like, well, how big is the gap in intelligence between the smartest non-human animal and just the typical human or even a dumb human? And I said, yeah, it's huge. Like, what would the smartest cow get on an SAT test? Right? You say, well, it's not in cow language. So yeah, I don't think that's the problem. The problem is cows are just really dumb. Right. And the same, now you say, well, some animals are smarter, chimpanzees. Yeah, they are smarter. So I have this running argument with my kids. What about chimpanzees? Like, all right, I'd be a bit concerned about eating a chimpanzee. Right. But anyway, that's where I'm coming from. I know. Now, as to why I said that this is a common view, well, think about almost any kind of science fiction show. All right. When the aliens can talk, then everyone immediately takes for granted that they're entitled to decent treatment. So if it's a Vulcan or a Klingon, or if it's, let's see, a Wookiee, right? As long as they can talk, like we got translation, we got subtitles, then it's like, well, like Chewbacca, you can't torture Chewbacca, you can't just kill him and eat him because he's a reasonably intelligent sentient being. But on the other hand, in the Star Trek universe, Star Wars universe, for example, there's the banthas that get ridden by the Sand People, and they're just like cows. And then if they get killed, it's like, well, it's, I guess, not such a big deal. So this is an intuition that people apply very naturally to different hypotheticals of other kinds of creatures that don't actually exist. And I think this is actually the right benchmark, even if it doesn't sound good to say.
Sure. So I want to ask about the
Wait, you're going to let
economic.
me get away with that, Micah? I thought you were going to bite my head off.
Well, it's fine, and I believe that bugs don't have that part to experience pain, I guess. I don't know what that even is, but
Like when a bug is in danger, does it not run like other animals? If there's a bug in your bathtub and you turn the water, does it not flee just like a human would? Mean, like, again, there's always people saying no, bugs don't respond to pain in a normal way, like they'll put weight on an injured leg. Like, first of all, I don't know about that, or maybe. But second of all, look, if we got 99 symptoms or 100 symptoms of feeling pain and bugs go and act on 99, it's good enough for me.
I have reason to believe that most animals would like to stay alive and
Yeah.
not get killed.
Yeah, including insects, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they have
Right.
instincts for that.
Yeah. So are you gonna go and start alter your whole way of living to protect insects?
No, but
Should you?
let's go on
Are
with this.
you evil, Micah, for not caring about the insects?
Well, I don't eat insects at least.
Okay, well, but you run over them with your bike and you walk on them with your shoes, and if there's one in your house, you probably kill it. Right, and
Yeah.
I know you're probably going to drive one day, and then you'll be killing insects in mass quantities. And are you a bad person for doing that?
That's a really interesting way to think about it. I have to rethink all my
Yeah,
thoughts now.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. Yeah. I want to ask about the economics of this pet trade. So
Mhm.
the market for puppies and kittens works pretty well, but the market for older dogs and cats doesn't work as well. Do you think there's a solution or do you have an idea about this?
Well, the way that economists normally measure whether a market is working well or not is just whether it satisfies the preferences of the humans that are involved. And in that case, you could say, well, both markets are working normally. Namely, there's high demand for the cute pets, and then they get bought for lots of money and have great lives. And there's low demand for the not so cute pets. And then in the eyes of the humans, things are fine. But in the eyes of the pets, of course, things are not so good. But the same goes, obviously, for any kind of animal product in terms of what you could do. Like, suppose you had an old dog and you didn't feel like you wanted to keep carrying him about him, but you didn't want to take him to the pound. There is the paying someone to take him off your hands solution. Right. So, I mean, you could put it this way. Normally, we think that every product has to have a price greater than zero, but really, there's no reason why some products couldn't have negative prices. Right. So, why is it that the right price of an elderly dog isn't like negative $1,000, where you get $1,000 to go and give an elderly dog, a good home? You could do it that way. I mean, in the end, I think the right story is that people that have an elderly dog, on the one hand, they feel bad for the dog, but on the other hand, they don't want to pay $1,000 to go and have someone else give them a good home. And then, guess what? I assume you've heard that it's not really true that unwanted pets go out to farms and have a great life in the countryside. You ever heard this story? You ever hear these stories? Oh, what happened to the dog? Oh, he went to live on a nice farm. He's happy. Right. And actually, normally those animals are dead, often from a pound. And if you put a lot of intrinsic weight upon their well-being, this is terrible. On the other hand, if you're just judging markets the normal way, it's fine. I mean, you have to understand that, like, economists analyze the market for meat or fur, same way as anything else. And yet, if you really care about the animals, you're saying, wait a second, the humans have fur coats, but the animals are dead. Terrible.
Yeah. Do you think the higher the price of the animal to buy the pet, the better it gets treated?
Very likely. Like part of this is, well, is the animal going to be a pet or something else? So if you can have like a very expensive kind of cow, but it doesn't mean that the cow is going to get definitely not going to get great treatment in the end, right? It's going to the slaughterhouse in the end. In terms of will it get good treatment or not, I'd say it gets good treatment in all the ways that are relevant to the final product. So, like, if you're worried about the marbling of the fat of the animal, then you're going to give it a diet that gives it that. Coincidentally, maybe the animal likes that diet and then it's happy about that. On the other hand, if you want the meat to be tender, you might not let the animal move around very much, and then the animal might not like that. I mean, again, like often with animals, you wonder, are they even smart enough to know the difference between being stuck in a pen and walking around? I don't know. Uh, I do know that when I look at cows, I just say, wow, they seem really dumb. They just sort of sit there eating grass. It's all they do practically. Someone who knew more might say, no, they have a very complex social structure. If you only understood They know who their cousins are. It's like, do they? I don't know. They seem really dumb.
What do you think about geese and animals that are force fed when farming?
So I mean, like geese are actually very rarely eaten by humans in my experience, but yeah, I mean, force feeding of animals, it's the kind of thing where if you put intrinsic weight on the welfare of the animal, then it's terrible. And you could say markets are terrible because they only care about the humans that are involved. They only care about the company making money and the consumers enjoying the final product. On the other hand, if you don't put much weight on non-human animals, then it's like, all right, it's ugly. And by the way, it's also worth pointing out there are a lot of things that are ugly where almost everyone accepts that they're actually fine. So surgery, like, so I've actually been present during 3 baby deliveries. It is so horrifying to an untrained person. They put up a sheet so that you don't see what's actually happening. I think because dads would be fainting otherwise. All right, now, does this show that in this case, cesarean section is actually bad because it's so terrible people don't want to look at it? And my answer is no. Something can be just fine and yet horrifying to look at. And this is the way that I honestly see most of the issues about mistreatment of animals, which is, well, it's horrible to look at, but if you really take like that insect hypothetical seriously, then I guess it's actually okay.
When I was thinking of talking to you, I was not thinking of these sort of things to be talking about. But anyway,
It's cool. You
so
talk about whatever you want, Micah.
sure, yeah. There are
Okay.
about 20 million pet birds, mostly parrots, who live about 20 years. Many birds are unwanted after some period of time. Rescue facilities say they can't take any more birds. Some people say birds should not be pets at all. And yet, I have a pet bird named Fruity, and he's very happy. But I'm sure many pet birds are not well cared for as they get older. What do you think should be done about birds?
I guess same thing as before. If you think the birds have some kind of intrinsic moral worth, then you get one answer. And if you think that that worth is at least super low, you get a different one. I mean, I'm actually a bit surprised by this because I would say that whereas cats and dogs obviously get way less fun as they get older, but birds, on the other hand, I think of as pretty constant. Maybe as a bird owner, I don't, you can tell me that I don't have any idea what I'm talking about. But like when you give someone a puppy, it's like, oh wow, a puppy! This is so great. I love. They're so adorable. But a bird, it's like, how old's the bird? I don't know. Could be 1 year. Could be 10 years. At least to most people, it's basically the same. Uh, in terms of like, if you were taking the welfare of the bird seriously, this is one where I would say, well, maybe they're not that well cared for, but it still seems like pet birds are probably getting way better treatment than almost any bird in nature. So, uh, if you were to say, well, like birds in nature, their lives aren't worth living either. Pet birds, it's better, but still not so. I don't know. I guess I would say that based on my experience, I think that pet birds, though I wouldn't be surprised if the treatment got worse over time, still are getting a really good deal for a bird. Um, but again, in a way that's all a cop out because my actual view is their welfare doesn't count very much, which is why I'm gonna probably go eat some chicken after I talk to you.
Over a million snakes are kept as pets in the U.S. In the U.S. I'm
Mm-hmm.
speaking badly, but researchers believe that more than 70% of snakes are wild caught, and 70% of snakes die before they even reach stores. According to one study, 75% of pet snakes die within 1 year,
Mm-hmm.
many from stress related to captivity, and yet you can actually order them by mail. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think this should be legal to be buy and sell snakes?
Yep. Given all the other stuff, of course, I'm going to say that. Let me just make all of your viewers really hate me. I think it's okay to eat dogs. I think it's really arbitrary that we've said that dogs shouldn't be eaten, and that societies that do eat dogs are barbaric. It's like why are dogs better than pigs? Like because they're cuter? It's like so the moral worth of a creature depends upon how adorable it is. I mean, like the intelligence one makes sense, but the one of just like treating animals based upon how they look, that one seems pretty far fetched to me. Right? It's like like the ugly aliens, like Return of the Jedi, the whatever the pigmen are called in the Star Wars universe. Like their lives aren't important because they're ugly compared to Princess Padme, who's great looking. So it's like no, like the intelligence one makes a lot more sense. It's how we actually do assess the sci-fi situations or hypothetical situations. Yeah. All right. So snakes are suffering. All right. Maybe, I would also think that snakes probably have a really hard time in the wild, but that's not my real argument.
I mean, if you're a snake and you're a pet, you have like a death wish as soon as you're even like caught.
Mhm.
After 1 year, like you're dead.
Yeah.
So
Well, what is the survival rate for wild snakes?
I don't have the numbers on that.
Yeah. So suppose the survival rate for wild snakes or was only 10% compared to per year, compared to 30% for the pets. Then you could say that, like those pet owners really are improving over a bad situation anyway.
What do you think about breeders who make their living breeding animals? Once it becomes a business, there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of incentive to produce animals and reduce costs.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, it is more about making money than taking good care of animals.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there are 10,000 puppy mills,
Mm-hmm.
30% of which um, have a license and most likely treat their animals okay. And the 7,000 illegal puppy mills generally treat the animals worse.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about all this?
Well, I guess I'm a little puzzled about why you're so concerned about pets when we've got factory farming. I mean, this is what my friends who are really into animal welfare will talk about. Many of them will even say, I don't think there's anything wrong with painlessly killing an animal and eating him. The wrong thing is putting them in a factory farm where they're suffering for their entire lives and they would have been better off if they'd never been born. I mean, I would say that if you are worried about animal welfare, factory farms are obviously the place to start with. There are a lot of efforts to go and reduce the cruelty of factory farms. Given my own view, I'm not really much of a supporter of this, but I would still say if I were worried about animal welfare, I would be really deprioritizing pets and saying, well, pets, I mean, compared to what the other animals have, they're getting a fantastic deal. And it's the animals that are eaten that are really doing badly. So, I mean, are you a vegan, Micah?
I'm vegetarian. I can't,
Okay.
yeah.
So
But
now again, like just to go and blow your mind, what my friends who are vegans will tell you. They'll say like the factory farming conditions of milk cows and egg chickens are basically as bad as those of animals that are going to be eaten. And so you are doing something really terrible just by consuming dairy and eggs. That's not my view, but they probably are know what they're talking about for the factory farming. It just comes down to the question of does the welfare of chickens actually matter very much?
yeah. By the way, my dad is a vegan, so
Ah, okay.
yes.
We're going to talk more about food later, but let's
Yeah.
talk.
Okay.
Say we're
All
We've
right.
got farm stuff later. So zoos, let's get on to zoos. There are 10 to 15,000 zoos in the world.
Mhm.
Like some other industries, zoos follow a 20-30-50 pattern. 20% of zoos are great. They belong to the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. They give money for animal conservation. They educate, are profitable, and keep the animals in good condition all year round. 30% of zoos are not bad, but not good. And 50% of zoos are small, marginally profitable, and don't take good care of the animals. So, what's your general opinion on zoos?
Let's see. First of all, I like zoos personally. I like zoos myself. All right. And let me give a shout out to the Down Under Zoo in Kentucky, which I've been a few times, where you can actually pet the kangaroos. I like that a lot. If you went there, I'm guessing you would put it in the 30% because they got all these lethargic kangaroos lying around. So I think they're giving them a diet where at least they're so overfed that they no longer have any will to move. They just sort of sit there. Occasionally they'll get up. But my view of zoos, again, is if you it's obviously way better than factory farming. If you think factory farming is terrible, then I would say the sensible thing is to focus entirely on that and not get distracted by other issues. If you think factory farming's okay, then zoos are definitely okay. Right? I do actually
Yeah.
have a different complaint about zoos, which is they're so full of environmentalist propaganda. And if you just go and read the cards on every animal, it's like comes down to like how could I restructure my entire life for the benefit of this species of animal that I'm only discovering just now. And then if you really did everything the zoo told you to do, like what you wouldn't have a minute left in your day. It would be all devoted to go and handling the special issues of every conceivable animal. Again, I think this is a strange and implausible priority.
So in general, you think zoos are a net positive?
Yeah. Because I'm always judging things by human welfare. Just the caveat I would have is that zoos are generally heavily subsidized by the government. So I am totally happy for reasons unrelated to animal welfare to pull the plug on them and say zoos have to go and make a profit or raise money from donations if they want to exist.
How about we move on to lab animals and using animals to do
Mhm.
experiments and tests? This is
Mhm.
an interesting part. So, more than 100 million mice and rats are killed in US laboratories every year. They are
Mhm.
designed for experiments and often experience pain, blah, blah, blah. Think about it from the point of view from the mice for once. What changes should be made here?
Hmm. Yeah, from the point of view of the animals, I mean, so this is one where if if they're just kept in a cage and they're not suffering from any terrible disease, then I would figure their lives are about as good as mice lives normally are. You might say, the mice really feel bad when they can't run around. I don't know, maybe, but that seems like way too much mind reading. I would just say, the mice seem really dumb. They're probably happy if they have enough to eat and they're not all alone. Um, but of course, if they are getting infected with diseases, then their lives are probably worse than not being around at all, especially if they're bad diseases. And then, yeah, it's bad from the point of view of the mice. Even there, I would say that on the one hand, you've got factory farming where the opponents will say, look, for just a little bit of gustatory pleasure, because they taste better, you're going to make these animals suffer horribly. All right. And it's like, all right, well, I see that argument at least. On the other hand, for animal experimentation, like, well, this is like a real chance of going and saving a lot of human lives. It's not just they taste better, it's they are saving lives. Um, and definitely, there's going to be some people say, oh, it's not really true that you need animal experimentation in order to go and figure out what's going on. It's like, well, what do you mean by need? It's not absolutely necessary? That's probably true. Is it helpful? Does it speed the discovery of effective medicines along by a matter of years? Seems plausible that it does. In which case, I'll say again, this seems like a one where even if you were really worried about animal welfare, it should be low priority because there's such a big gain in human welfare.
100,000 primates are killed
Mhm.
each year for experiments.
Mhm.
Even though it's highly regulated already, these animals are in small cages with low quality of life for their entire lives. Do you
Mhm.
think primates are different from other animals?
I think that they are the most plausibly, the animals that are most plausibly deserving of moral consideration. Here again, I would still distinguish between chimpanzees, where they seem much smarter than others, versus the simpler monkeys that often seem to be barely different from, say, squirrels, something like that. Um, so, I say it matters very much what kind of animal it is. So like I said, so like, would I eat chimpanzee? That's where I'm like, I don't know. I don't favor law stopping it, but I would be too morally nervous myself to go and do it. On the other hand, for say spider monkeys, they don't seem very different from squirrels to me. So I don't think there's a problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, I've got a question for you, Mike, about animals.
Yeah,
All right.
sure.
Pro-cloning mammoths or anti-cloning mammoths?
I really don't know anything about this sort of thing.
Well,
Um,
it could be done, right? So
well,
they got mammoth DNA. They could go and do whatever they do and implant it into a normal elephant, and out comes. Actually, the first one I think will be a half mammoth, but then they can do breeding and they can get it back to full mammoth after a number of generations. I think this would be fantastic. I would love this. I would pay like $1,000 if I could see an actual revived mammoth.
like for entertainment wise, that would be awesome, but
Mhm.
like actual benefits to the animal or the ecosystem, it's
Right.
not
Well,
necessary to
they'd
bring
just be in
back.
zoos probably. They'd be in
Yeah.
zoos, and human beings would love it. And these would be a few special animals, so I think they would get premium care.
Yeah, I think it would be fine. I don't have much of an opinion on bringing back animals that are extinct.
I'm only worried about the pterodactyls. Pterodactyls could get out, and then it seems like it'd be bad. But T Rexes, yeah, we could keep the T Rexes under control. I don't believe the Jurassic Park movies.
Okay. Sure. Fine. T-Rexes, maybe not pterodactyls.
Yep. But that's hard to do. The thing is, the mammoths, I think we got the technology to do it already.
Yeah.
T-Rexes, we don't.
What I think of this shark stuff is like, can't humans have a better reason to kill 100 million sharks every single year than just a status symbol? Um, that's a little self-centered,
Yeah.
for the
I mean,
humans.
don't they also serve the meat? Don't people want to eat that too? So the
No,
only edible
they
part of a
don't.
shark is the fin.
No, they catch the shark, cut the fins off, throw it back in the water. It's still
Yeah.
alive, but it'll die very soon because sharks
Mhm.
need to
Yeah.
swim to stay alive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, I would just say if you just compare this to other kinds of factory farming, I don't see it as being worse, better than a lot of it, really.
So pangolins are scaly anteaters who live in Africa and Asia. Each year, at least 2 million pangolins are killed for soup, meat, and scales to make medicine that doesn't work. All pangolin species are decreasing, with two species critically endangered. After humans, penguins are the second most trafficked mammal in the world. Thoughts?
I mean, anytime you're talking about poaching or trafficking of animals, this is in the background of either a world where government just makes it illegal for you to do it at all, or where government makes it illegal for you to own the animals. There have been, we're just to back up. There's a bunch of animals no one is worried will ever go extinct. These are the domestic animals that human beings consume. No one's worried about chickens going extinct or cows going extinct or pigs going extinct because they are on farms and there's a human being that, even though they don't have much incentive to treat them well, they do have an incentive to keep the species around. On the other hand, species that people are worried about disappearing are generally ones where there's no private ownership. So there have been some really neat experiments in the case of elephants where I think it's actually in Zimbabwe where they have allowed private ownership of elephants. And they found, wow, once they're privately owned, then this leads to a large reduction in the hunting and a large increase in the population. There's someone around that now has a direct incentive to go and maintain the numbers. Doesn't mean the animals are going to get great treatment, but if you're worried about animals being hunted to extinction, that's just the kind of thing when they're not owned. If they were owned, then they would get treated like other domestic animals. If you think that's terrible, and there's definitely some smart people do, then it's not much a solution. But on the other hand, if the issue is I just want this species to continue to exist, it's a great solution.
So, speaking of this, like demand, for these products and stuff, if you had to stop it, would you rather work on stopping the supply of the products or the demand for the products?
Ah, good question. All right. So in the real world, when governments want to stop something, they normally put almost all effort on suppliers. As to why they do this, well, one story is just that it's easier. There's a smaller number of suppliers, and so you can just target your energy on them. But I think another part that is actually at least important is that people demonize suppliers, whereas they think of consumers as at least less culpable, or maybe even they're somehow victims. So you see this in things like drugs, where people say, "Let's go and execute drug dealers." What about drug users? No, they're innocent victims of the horrible pushers. It's like, well, what about a drug consumer who also sells? Is he a victim or is he a villain? Right. So in the same case, when you're dealing with, say, elephant poaching, if you say, well, let's go after the sellers or the buyers, there is this pragmatic argument of there's just fewer people that are sellers, so it's easy to go after them. But yeah, I think that often that's more of an excuse. And the actual story is that people think of the consumers as morally much better. Generally, I don't see why that's so. You might say, well, the sellers know all the cruelty and the buyers don't. It's like, well, could the buyers find out by Googling? Yes. All right. Did they? No. All right. Well, it's pretty bad, isn't it?
Each year, 450 rhinos are killed for their horns, particularly part partly, not particularly, for Chinese medicine, but also for sculptures. In Kruger National Park, one rhino is killed every single day. The poachers have almost unlimited resources
Mhm.
because each single horn sells for about $20,000. A small sculpture can sell for more than $100,000. What do you think here?
Yeah, we got to privatize those rhinos, man. Privatize the rhinos. We don't hear about cows getting poached. Not even the really valuable Kobe cows of Japan. Don't hear about them getting poached. Yeah, if there is an unknown resource and government says that no one can own it and we're going to punish you for going after it and it's worth that much money, people are going to break the law, of course. If you were to go and privatize the rhino, so there's an owner and say you can do whatever you want with this rhino, but it's your rhino. So if you kill it right away instead of breeding it, then you are going to lose a lot of money and they'll get treated like other domestic animals, which, to repeat, if you think that's fine, is fine. If you think that's terrible, is worse. Right? I mean, I definitely have friends who think that it'd be better for rhinos to go extinct than to be in factory rhino farms.
Who wants to own a rhino?
Who wants to do what with a rhino?
Own a rhino like as a
Oh,
pet.
Who wants to own a rhino? Well, someone that wants to make a whole bunch of rhinos and sell their horns. It's the obvious one. Of course, there's also zoos and things like that. I assume the meat is edible. I don't know if it tastes any good, but put that all together and yeah, like it's going to be that demand for the rhino horn, which sounds like the main thing that people care about. The difference though is that if it's owned, then you're going to say, well, I don't want to kill it right away. I want to, first of all, let it breed, and second of all, wait for the horn to get big enough, and then I'll kill it, and then I'll have a bunch of baby rhinos, and I'll breed those, and I'll get even more rhinos, and so on.
Just the thing I hate about this poaching stuff is just the reason behind it. You don't need to have a status symbol to kill 100 million sharks.
Mm-hmm.
You don't. The only plausible reason is for art, like elephant
Mm-hmm.
tusks and rhino
Mm-hmm.
sculptures.
Well, art's a bit
But
of a status symbol too, right?
yeah, sort of.
Why can't you just have a poster of the Lord of the Rings? Why does it have to be a rhino tusk based artwork? This is one where the usual view of the suppliers as the ultra villains and the consumers as just being naive or even victimized, especially crazy. So I think it's very likely that a lot of the people that are illegally hunting rhinos are desperately poor Africans who are just trying to survive. And the people that are paying $20,000 for rhino horns, on the other hand, are not in such a desperate situation. So, if anything, I'd say put the moral blame on the consumers. Although, actually, as you probably can guess, I don't blame them either because I don't think that's bad. I just blame the government for not allowing private property in rhinos, which I think is the real crime.
Let's talk about farming. Here's the question, Brian. What percentage of cattle farming do you think is feedlots?
Well, let's see. The naive answer would be all the cows I see are on grass pastures and none are on feedlots, but I know that's wrong. So, I mean, I would guess actually like 90%. What is the correct answer?
Approximately 70 to 80%. So yeah, you were pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a mystery as to why people waste perfectly good around when there is they could do the feedlot approach.
Lab-grown meat is an industry getting more and more attention. What do you think of it?
So far, I've never tasted any fake animal product that didn't make me feel sick to my stomach, or at least make me go, gross. If you could go and get stuff that tasted just as good as the real thing, then wonderful. The next thing that's going to happen, by the way, is that domestic animals basically disappear and they just are confined to zoos. And yeah, that's the kind of thing that actually could make chickens endangered. But so that's the prediction. Again, if of course, your anti-factory farming people say good because their lives are worse than nothing. So it's better that they disappear.
So if it tasted the same and the price was the same, would you have a preference for lab-grown meat?
Ever so slightly, real small, real small.
Okay.
Just like if I had a car that wouldn't kill insects, how much extra would I pay for it? Maybe a penny per life.
Okay. Well,
Greater than zero, but not anything noticeable. For smarter animals, more.
so yeah, to wrap up, what are your top 4 or 5 priorities that you would like to see to help animals?
Definitely clearing all obstacles against lab-grown meat and things like that. So the Italian government is actually, I think they're banning some kinds of lab-grown meat as being a violation of Italian culture and their long tradition of animal husbandry. So anyway, any barriers that you've got in the way of lab-grown meat, anytime the government is actively encouraging it, I say, well, let's just get rid of the government subsidies and then see what happens. So I said zoos get a lot of subsidies. It's common for governments to subsidize agriculture. So I think that get rid of that. And I think that would at least possibly be better for animals. And then what else? Here's one. So privatization of national parks, privatization of government lands, and so that whoever owns the land then owns the animals. Legalization of owning any animal. Right? These are things which, again, they will be very good for keeping species around. That doesn't necessarily mean that the animals' lives will individually be better, depending upon your view about factory farming and that kind of thing. And then the most sci-fi one, I would say, is extending this to the oceans. You might have you ever heard of something called aquaculture, Micah?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So big fan of aquaculture. It goes against current law with saying that the oceans just have to be either owned by government or be international waters. But applying the same logic of private property to water bodies is, I think, a great idea, and will first of all lead to the preservation of valuable species that people are hunting, not because the owners care about them directly, but just to go and make more money. But then also lead to a great reduction in problems of just overfishing, because once you own it, then you don't want them to go away, right? No one worries about chickens disappearing, but we do worry about fish disappearing. And what's the difference? Fish are commonly owned, or in other words, unowned, and chickens aren't.
You realize pretty much every single one of your answers is the exact opposite of what Tyler counts as, except some government stuff.
Yeah, well, so Tyler officially does think that animal welfare is morally significant, but unofficially, I don't think he cares at all. Actually, I've eaten tons of animals with Tyler. I don't see that stopping anytime soon. Uh, like a big difference between me and him is that he's very comfortable with hypocrisy and I'm not. So if you convince me, I'll change, but you got to convince me. Tyler's real easy to convince, but he doesn't change.
Thank you for talking with me today, Bryan, and thank you for watching. You can help animals by hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. I'll see you next time on Nature's Guardians. Bye.